Okay. The mic is hot. Let's move on to item number 4, public hearing, Saratoga Springs 2 church site plan located at 233 East Schoolhouse Road. Evans Associates is the architecture is the applicant, and we'll turn the time over to Kara Knighton.
Turn this mic on. So the applicant is requesting approval of a site plan for a church on a 3.25 acre parcel. The project is part of the Legacy Farms development, located in the middle part of the city, 400 South and Redwood Road. The project, zoomed in, this is north up with Redwood Road. The project complies with both the community plan and village plan 2, and with conditions complies with code. The community plan allocated 41 equivalent residential units to a school and church site for Village Plan 2. Of that, the school, which was approved back in January of 2016, used 31 of those ERUs, leaving 10 remaining for the church site, and the current square footage of the church equates to 10 ERUs, which is within the allotment. This is their proposed site plan. You can see here, this is Schoolhouse, where they're fronting onto. The school would be just north of here, so north is up. Redwood Road would be over to the west. This is their landscaping plan and their elevations. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing, take public input, discuss the application, and vote to forward a positive recommendation to the City Council. Alternatives, with the additional condition, there is one double row parking lot island that is slightly below the 9 feet, just barely, so that'll need to be adjusted to meet code compliance. Alternatives include continuance or a negative recommendation. As this is a public hearing, notices were sent to properties within 300 feet. Up to this point, no comments have been received. Thank you. Oh, and I will mention the applicant was not able to be with us tonight, so if you have any questions, staff is able to answer those.
Thank you, Kara. Okay, given that this is a public meeting, we will open public comment at this time. Anyone? Given that no one is in the room, we'll close public comment at this time and open it to the Planning Commission. Commissioner Funk.
Yes, on 19.09, right before 19.11, that's the last item there. I think you need to correct one word there. At the last line there says the project proposes 210 seats, and that should be 210 parking stalls.
Good catch.
This was written with the movie Cars in mind, and they call them seats.
All right, any other comments?
I have a question.
Commissioner Cunningham.
On page 2, about the middle of the page where it says Urban Design and Architectural Review, item number 2, recommendation, it is recommended that a pathway, perhaps using the parking islands, be provided to allow connection from the trail to the south.
Yeah, so
The trail, can you show?
here's what is going. So there is a trail that currently runs right through here, and then there's lots, so it curves this way. So originally when the Development Review Committee reviewed this, we recommended a connection through here up to the church site. However, and that could have been anywhere through here. So they have a fairly large retaining wall running through here. And as well, the community plan requires a semi-private fence along the entire length of this back area. There really was not a feasible, productive way that we could get the trail to connect.
That's kind of too bad because it would encourage people to walk to church.
Yeah, however, do keep in mind that there is a connection right through here. It's just a couple of, basically one house over, and then there is a connection in Village Plan 2 that goes right through here.
And that's where the pathway that goes to school, right?
Yeah. do believe so. Let me go to the aerial real quick. It's right there, but it's got the, we can just go there while I can see the map. One moment.
I want a link to this. Can we get a link to this?
So
Can
the
we get a link
pathway
to
would
this?
goes right up through here, like that. So the church site's right here. So it is one lot over.
Could you demonstrate? It looks like there was an issue about the garbage area and that there was too much space in the back. Can you show us where that is? Karen, there was something about a garbage can and there was too much space in the back, or what was that about?
So the applicant addressed that one when in speaking with them. So let me go back to the PowerPoint really quick and I can show you this one here. Okay, so the initial concern was that there wasn't enough area back through here. When just for site and feasibility and all that stuff. However, the area is wider than staff thought, and it's a little over 5 feet. So it's enough to kind of see around and see what's going through here.
Is that where the garbage is back there?
Yeah, this is the enclosure right here.
Okay. Any other comments from the planning commission?
I have a couple.
Okay, Commissioner Kilgore.
So, let's see. Oh, section, it's the same page that, page 2, because I had it. All right, and then it's the pedestrian walkways and accesses. Oh, okay, I think you actually answered it, right, because we just talked about the trail. Okay, never mind. Then on the next page, architecture, it says that the architectural and urban design requirements, it can comply, but it didn't specifically say why it can comply as opposed to it does comply. So is it the space behind the trash enclosure? Apparently not. Or is it the landscaping, trees? Is that the issue?
Sorry.
The next one's landscape.
It was 19.14.
Site plan okay.
What was the specific subsection down there?
It says 19.14, and then it's the second bullet, architectural urban design requirements, and then it says can't comply. So is it the landscaping? Because there were some issues, some questions about the trees. But
I think
thought
that
they
was
fixed
just
it.
a typo when I finished it up.
So
I
it's,
think I just missed
so it
it.
probably is comply then? Okay,
It does comply, yes.
okay, then I have no further questions.
Do you have any? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
So one question, no extra addendums. We're ready to just go with as is, right?
Yeah.
Move that we forward a positive recommendation to City Council for the Saratoga Springs 2 site plan located on parcel 45-518-0241, and as shown in Exhibit 2 with the findings and conditions in the staff report dated October 6th, 2016.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any question on the motion?
Could you add the additional condition of the parking lot island? The one that I wrote.
Oh, yeah, that's why I asked that before. So, yeah, good job, Kimber. Well, glad someone's willing to fall on the sword. So what is that addendum?
The
And I
southeast
accept
double
that.
row parking lot island be increased to 9 feet
Okay.
in width.
Oh. And with the additional condition of the southeast double row parking lot island shall be increased to 9 feet in width.
And I accept it.
Thank you. Any other questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 7, which is a work session. Code amendments, Title 19, multiple sections, including open space, ERUs, mixed waterfront and buffer overlay, design standards, 19.04 overhaul and setbacks. And we'll turn this over to staff.
All right. Look at your shining faces. You're all so excited.
Is that what you're seeing?
Yes. Okay.
Is this an advertisement?
That's funny. No. Okay, so we have a big, yes, thank you, Vanna. Appreciate that. Okay, we have a big packet here, and we're trying to get as much of this through to the public hearing process as possible, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of input and discussion. So we're just kind of going to run through it with the summary. We have the whole packet we can pull up and look at specific language. But what we're looking at here, 1904, hopefully you were able to follow along with going from Excel tables into Word. I'm sure you noticed a few typos. We apologize for that. There were some boxes where the sentence wrapped and just disappeared. So if you were reading a sentence and it disappeared, the whole thing's there. It just didn't show up in your report. But what we were looking at here is reformatting completely, making it much more concise and consistent so you don't have repetitive sections. You don't have a buffer setback in every single residential zone that reads slightly differently but has the same goal. You just have the one standard, which of course has been moved to another location. Here, let me borrow this mouse. Thanks. So the development standards, we have them in a table. And then anything that's more of a design standard, like a buffer around a parking lot, as I was just mentioning, those got moved into the design standards chapter, which is a whole brand new chapter. Some setback changes. Most of the setbacks remain the same. We proposed reducing some of the commercial setbacks. And then also allowing for footprint development. Right now, our code is not really built for it. We've allowed it in a very roundabout way a couple of times. But our code is not really designed for footprint development where you own either in a townhome or a single family home, you own just the footprint of your home, and then everything outside of that is held in common and maintained together. You don't have to do your own landscaping, etc. All of those open space requirements that we had, you know, you have a certain percentage in each zone, 15% in the R3, 20% in the R18, etc. All of that was moved into the new open space program in 1919. You've seen the open space code a couple of times. We'll talk about that here in just a second. But we tried to remove all of those references so that they're all in one place once again. Okay, so do we want to, how do you prefer to do this? Do we want to talk about this, then look at that section of code, and then come back and talk about the next section? Okay, we'll do that.
Parse it.
We'll parse it a little bit. Okay, if the mouse will work. Okay, I need a different paper here. Use that. Okay, need new batteries. Okay, so here's what you see. This is the clean version. Do we have the tracked version in here? It's after. Okay, good. We can go there if you need to see the changes, but it's going to be a cluster of red lines and colors. So here we have the summary of everything. We have the purpose and intent, and each one of these has their original purpose and intent statement with a few minor modifications. And then also we go through where we renamed the zones. We talked about that last time. And what we're trying to get away from right now with the renaming is this assumption that you get a certain amount of density if you're in a certain zone. Right now, so let's look at we're going to come here to the R110. In the R110 zone, right now that is the R3, okay? Developers come into the city and they see the R3 and they go, oh, it's 3 units per acre, I get 3 units per acre. Well, once you take out open space and roads and lot sizes, sensitive lands, detention basins, etc., I can't think of a development that's gotten 3. Can you? They average around 2.3 to 2.5 units per acre. So people feel like we've taken something away from them, but they never had it in the first place. If you say R110, this is a 10,000 square foot lot zone. They go, oh, I get as many 10,000 square foot lots as I can fit with my parameters. So it changes the expectation. Instead of thinking, I should get 3 units per acre, city, you're taking things away from me, they know up front they're getting 10,000 square foot lots. And so that's the goal with this renaming. A lot of cities do this. If it's confusing, we can try to make it more straightforward, or we're obviously looking for your input on this as well.
The difference between, you know, all the R1, what is R1, is that residential?
Single family, R1. One means single.
Mm-hmm. So that would be R2, so that's
Two
like
family.
duplex.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, R3 is 3 family.
Yes.
That makes sense.
And then you go into the MF, the multifamily. Trying to make it simple, but we'll see. Think it through, give us your feedback. Now with the multifamily, we do get back to units per acre, because you can fit a lot of multifamily in a small location, so you still need that density parameter. But with multifamily, you're not concerned about lot size. We have minimums for dwelling size, we have open space requirements, you're concerned about livability. So we went back to units per acre for just the multifamily zone. Okay, so then we have a table. This is the table of allowed uses. Obviously, we need a little formatting cleaning up, but this is the draft. So all of the different permitted and conditional uses for these different zones, pretty much the same. Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so then here, oh, thank you. If you want to change that, well, I won't use the mouse for a minute. Okay, so then we have the development standards table. For the most part, we tried to highlight in yellow what was changed. Some of it we missed, but it's pretty, I'm trying to escape from that, but oh well. It pretty much shows some of those changes. So on the top row, you see the current zone name, and on the bottom, the yellow line right below it, you see the new zone name and where it's changed. Now, a few of the changes we did propose in the R18 zone, the R4 current zone, to go down a little bit more in lot size, 8,000 versus 9,000, and then down in the R5 into the duplex zone down to 6. And that, right now, it was a little bit more of a sudden drop off. You had bigger, 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 small. And so this is more of a taper down by zone. Yes. Uh-huh.
So on the R18,
Mm-hmm.
if it's got an 8,000 foot lot, you choose shown?
Well, no. So if you're developing a non-footprint development where people own their own lots, the minimum is 8,000. If they're developing a footprint development, we have the parameters down below. You don't have to have 8,000 square feet per house. So the 8,000 is if you're doing a lot development, not a footprint development.
So if you were to develop a footprint development in an R18,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of land per home is the same, so it would be like about 8,000 per lot, but we're just taking away the lot lines.
Right.
And leaving that as all.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
But the density would be the same.
Yep.
It's just whether or not we have more.
Make sure we have that parameter in there. Okay. And we'll clarify that a little bit as well, because we want to make sure that's the end result. So, okay. All right. So then, okay, that was it. That. Okay. So then the setbacks for residential pretty much stayed the same. We had originally thought about reducing the setbacks in some of the residential zones to allow a 15-foot corner setback. What we have found, however, working with the utility companies, we've had some major issues arise in a few developments. Let me back up. We've had a lot of developers ask for a 15-foot corner side setback. And they were approved previously in some PUDs, so we're dealing with some of those now. And then also in legacy farms, they were approved. Well, there's this great requirement that the utility companies have for separation between their line and a structure. And so if they put so if you have a 10-foot public utility easement, and they lay their line at the back of the 10-foot easement, there's a 10-foot offset requirement. So you are, by default, requiring a 20-foot setback. And so we've run into issues where they put their line at the back, and you had structures, and they're having to go in and rip out foundations because they're too close to a gas pipeline. So we don't want to perpetuate that. We're still leaving it at a 20-foot because for utilities, without changing our whole road cross-section and allowing utilities under our sidewalks and under our roads, we can't allow reduced setbacks. So these all stayed the same.
Setbacks to vary.
We've been talking with them. In terms of forcing them to, it becomes a little bit more tricky. We've been able to work out some solutions in these limited circumstances where they actually come out and put their line under the edge of the sidewalk, but they don't like to do that because then they're liable for our sidewalk when they rip it in and out, and they don't want to do that. So we're working out some solutions with them, but to avoid the problem for now is our preference.
So if
But
you have it at
excellent
20, then they're not going to put it at the rear of the 20, so that we have to have 30, right?
No. So they're still in the 10-foot utility easement,
Okay.
so a 20-foot setback builds in that 10-foot separation.
They understand that's a setback, not a...
That's a setback, not a PUE, yes. Okay. Go ahead. Mhm. In a minute, yes, we have a couple standards for those as well. Really quick, I don't think, commercial setbacks are later, right? Okay, perfect. We'll talk about commercials. So we still have the lot size reduction allowable that we currently have with criteria. Let's see, with criteria, limited to 10% reduction and no more than 25% of the total lot. So that's the current code right now. Footprint development, we just have these currently, where in addition to so they will have the same parks open space requirement that every other residential development will have. But in the open space chapter in 1909, you'll notice that we have a floor for percentages. So if someone provides a bunch of really nice improved park space, they might not actually have that many acres to provide because of the formula. But we put a floor in place in residential, single-family residential of 10% and multifamily of 15%. So even if their obligation, well, we'll talk about it, it gets confusing, but there's a floor there of 10% or 15% of the area as open space. Well, if you're doing footprint development, they have to have a minimum of 35% of the project area to be common area. And some of that will be park space, open space, but some of that will be the common area with the driveways and the shared spaces. So what that does is it makes sure that they're not crowding everything too close together, and you still have a livable project.
Do we
So-
have anything with the footprint development that will allow for small private spaces behind a home? Kind of like a place for a barbecue or something like that? Because I know we've run into
That's a
that
good
in the past.
Because we don't have that. That's a good point. We can put that in there because, well, so what they would end up with, it's limited common area. So it's still owned by the entire community, but the access is limited to that unit. So you have the common area and the limited common area, and so we can address that.
Okay.
Where they have their own, like a patio or a barbecue, yeah.
They could fence to,
That they can put fences on the edges.
Yeah, 'cause
Okay.
I thought it did cover for like balconies, so that extends out, right? So
Mm-hmm. We'll clarify that.
Okay.
That's excellent.
And
Thank you.
awnings, too.
Balconies, awnings, yep. Okay. All right, so previously there was, in each zone, we had a section on how much open space and how much landscaping was required. Open space for residential and landscaping for non-residential uses. So this is all that's left, these little A, B, C, and D here that references our new open space program. So all residential development is subject to 1919, which is a new chapter. If you've never seen that reference before, it's because it's empty right now. We're going to fill it with our open space code and start referencing it a lot. We're excited. If the language looks familiar, though, you did see it. It was included in the Mount Saratoga Development Agreement. So you should have had enough time to get your toes wet with that program. All right. moving on to the redlined version. We're going to skip that because that is why your packet is 70 pages long. It's here if you have questions.
I did
Oh,
on that
okay.
part. I had a couple of questions on the permitted and conditional use area.
Okay.
Um,
In the ag zone or the residential zones?
no, this is commercial.
Okay, we're not there yet.
Oh, I thought
Sorry.
you went down to it.
We went down, but we're down just to
Oh.
the redlined residential. We'll be at commercial in just a second. Let me get there. Okay. So in the commercial, you have, again, the purpose and intent of these non-residential zones with the addition of the community commercial zone. So the community commercial zone is intended to be a transition between big box and the little neighborhood places, so that it's that middle transition commercial zone. So everything else stays pretty much the same, and now we are down to the permitted and conditional uses. Commissioner Funk.
Okay. And I'll start with that community commercial. Can you, I mean, I've read numerous times the definition, but can
Of
you
what?
clarify what you foresee because maybe I'm not understanding it completely.
Which one?
Community commercial.
Oh, community commercial, okay. So if you'll recall, over the past couple of years, we have received applications for rezones to regional commercial that might be right next to a neighborhood. And regional commercial is meant to, it's automobile oriented, people drive to it, it has a regional draw, which is why it's called regional commercial. And so you often see things like Walmart's there. It allows for auto repair, auto dealerships, vehicle sales, those types of things. So bigger impacts. But our problem is we don't have anything else that allows some of those medium uses, you know, for example, a medium box store or a gas station. We just go straight from regional commercial to neighborhood commercial. Neighborhood commercial is meant to be very compatible with a neighborhood, whether it's a yoga studio or something low impact. Smaller footprint. They're limited to a maximum square footage of, I believe, 15,000 square feet if you wanted to do a grocery store, which is pretty small. So neighborhood commercial is tiny and regional commercial is big and has a lot of impacts. So what we're trying to do is create a zone that would still be appropriate, closer to a neighborhood, still have some of a regional draw, but not allow the really impactful uses like big box, like auto repair, like auto sales. And so it's that transitional middle ground. You might see, you know, a Walgreens, for example. It has some sort of regional draw to it, but it's a fairly small footprint compared to a Walmart or an auto sales.
And I'm assuming that this is, so you're not talking strip malls here, you're talking a one.
Well, they
basically
could
a
have
one?
some strip malls in there. I mean, that still could, I mean, in the neighborhood commercial, you could still have a strip mall. We don't prohibit them, although our design standards push for parking behind them, so it makes it harder for them to do the traditional strip mall layout, thankfully.
Okay, in that case, I would think that we might well, first, can you go to the second page of that just to see, okay, yeah, and see how it put the labels in there. So you'll
Yeah,
want
we
to
have
put
some
the,
formatting
you'll
we
want to
need
put
to
the CC in there for that one, make sure
Yeah.
that, because with a blank means it's not allowed, so.
Yeah, so what we actually are going to do once we get all of the formatting done, because everything's shifting up and down,
Right.
these labels will actually be at the top and bottom of each page, and so we'll get that fixed.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure
Yes.
you don't just leave it blank.
Oh, and we're not going to leave it blank or formatted differently, so it looks like it's,
Right, and
Yeah.
I knew you'd straighten it up, but I just didn't want
Yep.
it blank. Okay, my question is on churches.
uh-huh.
Um, I just wondered about that,
It's
making
in
that
regional though, isn't it?
Uh,
Oh, no, it's not, okay.
maybe not necessarily
Seeing a lot of
that, maybe it's conditional, maybe not necessarily permitted, but
So
One of the reasons that we have left it out of the community commercial zone in particular is we want to create regional centers that also have a tax base, and generally churches don't have a tax base, and they're
Right.
taking up commercial space.
Right.
So that was the reason for it, that maybe they could go in other locations that.
Yeah, and my thought on it was, a lot of times small churches will go into a strip mall and use it, and that would prohibit it because it's a blank, it's a prohibited.
Right. Oh,
And that's why
we
I
can
was-
add it. Is there?
That's why I was
if-
considering it for that.
If there's an
So
agreement.
Ring
that should
Road,
be
there was a new chapel recently, and that was residential commercial, right?
neighborhood commercial.
Commercial,
in,
but they
Jacob's
rezoned it.
Ranch.
Did they rezone? Neighborhood.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what residential commercial was the other one I was concerned about with churches. Regional commercial, I'm sorry, regional commercial. And so I wonder if you might want to make that
Well,
conditional there.
maybe we can put a cap on the size though, but I don't know if that's against the Religious Land Use Act. And the reason I say that is because I see what you're saying about a small church in a strip mall, but if a 5-acre parcel came in and if 5 acres was taken up in the regional commercial zone for a church, then we designated that for commercial use, and we're putting in a church which has 0 tax draw and
Right.
0
And what about
commercial draw.
parking too? If it's
So
a
it-
church, we still go with the same rules of, 1 parking stall for every 3 seats or something like. Would that would probably be very different from what or is that very different from what commercial requirements are? See that I actually think that maybe we shouldn't have it because the tax base argument's a good one, and then it just kind of screws up with the parking potentially.
When the hours of activity for a church are generally quite different from a commercial center as well. So if you're trying to create an active commercial development, it could be in opposition to that.
So having said that, though, is there a place for some church to other than having already bought up land or something?
Well, there's so many other zones that they can go in, and they can go in all of the residential zones.
Okay.
If we're going to discuss that, I would like a consensus which way we want to go on that.
Part of the reason I put that in there, or was thinking about that being in there, is because it says that it's, the idea was for creating a gathering space and promoting pedestrian activity, and I was thinking, a little local church might do that. And that's what I was looking at. The other thing I was concerned about, which goes right along with that, was the commuter light rail station. I was wondering about that on the CC.
Mhm. That makes sense. We can put it in as probably a conditional use.
Not necessarily
Just put it in more. Actually.
permitted, but conditional.
We're going to add it to a few more zones.
Okay,
That'd be great. Thank you.
and that's all I had then on those.
And then just to let you know, we also did hear Commissioner Steele is out of town. She did give us feedback, though, with some concern over large veterinary hospitals being in the community commercial zone and being more appropriate for larger commercial development and in the ag zones. So just for...
So the veterinary, is that hospital that we have right now? What zone is that? Is that the
Regional commercial.
Okay.
All right. If you have time to look over this and have any other comments, just go ahead and shoot us an email. We want to make sure it's functional and makes sense to you as well. So just a reminder, some of these that you see have a small, superscript A or E. A means ancillary, so that means it's only allowed as part of another use. So for example, in this case, child care center in the mixed lakeshore, that would be something that was part of another office building or another use ancillary to that main use. Same thing, so edge over here, convenience store in the business park, that means that it's a conditional use on the edge of a business park development, so within the first 300 feet of that. So it's serving the outer portion of the community and the business park itself, but only on the edge, not taking up the business park zone. Okay. Moving on. And then there's the description here where you've got the little explanation. Okay, so the development standards, you can see the proposal for the lot sizes and the setbacks in the community commercial zone. Some of these setbacks, let's see. Didn't we change some other commercial setbacks that are not yellow? So we're proposing some tighter setbacks in the commercial zones, and the reason for that is that you don't actually need to have the utilities running right along the street in these commercial zones. When you're planning a development, you can have your utilities running through your parking lot, behind a building, or in front of a building. So you don't need the setback for utility purposes like you do in the residential zones. And also in some of the more intense commercial developments, you want more of a streetscape with a tighter setback so that you're easy access to the businesses. It feels more pedestrian oriented.
There are more changes that aren't highlighted. I apologize. I
couldn't remember
there's
which ones.
actually a handful of changes in that table. It's definitely the front setbacks. We changed the regional commercial
To
zone.
10.
The regional commercial zone was 25, I believe. We changed that to 10. The office warehouse was 30, well, 50 with a possible reduction to 30, and we changed that to 20. And then I believe that was the same in, yeah, right. So we made it a handful of setback changes. Next time we bring that back, I'll have all those highlighted. But we did. We made a handful of changes to the setbacks in the commercial zones. About a year ago, we took a field trip with a couple of council members and staff and looked at on-site examples and took notes and came up with ideas on what we wanted to see in our commercial zones. One of the main reasons for changing it in the regional commercial zone is to encourage parking in the back. And then the reason we kept them larger in the neighborhood commercial and the community commercial is because those are oriented in neighborhoods or in close proximity to neighborhoods. So we wanted those setbacks to be equal to what homes would have, so that if you drive through, you have consistency in building setback as you approach those developments. But in the regional commercial and also in the office, warehouse, and industrial, we felt that a 50-foot setback was quite a large setback for that type of development. If you drive through an industrial park, they're actually trying to maximize parking and driveways and truck routes and getting deliveries in and out and things like that. And having a 50-foot setback means that all of that happens in the front rather than in the back. So those are the main reasons for those changes. Also, there were a bunch of exceptions listed in the code that they could possibly have an exception for this and possibly have an exception for that. And now we just left it in 2 locations. So you can see in the table where there's an X for exceptions. So in the NC and CC zone, they can still request an exception, and that would be on a case-by-case basis. And then in the other zones, because we're reducing setbacks, they wouldn't need to request exceptions.
Okay. All right, so here's
Yeah,
go ahead.
what the rest of that sentence was right there.
Yes, so this is talking about, let's find the star, which is, where is the star?
Over to the, up top left corner, sorry. Minimum project size.
Oh, the project size, okay. So here you see up here with some developments have a minimum project size where we don't want to see these little one-off projects, because the type of zone, a business park, you kind of need a park. You don't just want a Tesoro to come in on the corner by itself. That's not a business park, right? So the code has for years required a master plan. And so what we're proposing is, instead of having a full-on master development agreement, a lot of these projects don't know for sure what's going to go in and where, and can't give you a specific layout of, this business is going here and this business is going here and they need 20,000 square feet and they need 5,000 square feet and this is how we're going to do it. They may have their first anchor tenant coming in, but we want to make sure that it's going to be developable in a logical manner. So we're looking for a master concept plan. Is that what we're calling it? Yes, okay. Comprehensive concept plan.
Just call it CCP. That sounds cool.
We might have to rethink that one. So lots may be created within the development based on a comprehensive concept plan. And so what we want to have is a concept plan process where you can see, okay, these lots are going to work. Here's the first one they're bringing in. Here's a conceptual layout for how the rest of it can work, how the roads can lay out, making sure that there is some thought going into how it's all going to work together. Comprehensive concept plan. But they're not locked into that like they are with a master development agreement and have to come back and amend it all the time. And so that's what that rest of that sentence is. Okay. Mixed use has its own table because it gets a little complicated. Kara, do you want to talk about this really briefly? Oh, sorry. She did mixed waterfront. My bad.
Yeah. So mixed use has always been a little bit strange because in our code currently it only had requirements for residential. The setbacks and lot sizes and things like that only addressed residential, but obviously mixed use allows for commercial separate from residential, commercial near, the arterial and residential and back, or commercial above, and it wasn't written in a way that addressed all of those different categories. So the yellow are mostly additions, and I think one change was adding a lot size for 2 and 3 family because that wasn't in there either. And what this does is go through and add a lot of different options and different, so one thing you might also see is a development that's entirely commercial on the ground level with residential above, or commercial and then office buildings and then residential, or some of that plus other types of, commercial without residential, or residential in the back with some of that, or without residential on top. So it's trying to address all of those different scenarios, and which it wasn't doing before. So I'm trying to scroll down, and it's just zooming in and out.
Yeah, you have to grab it.
Oh, thank you.
What's the logic behind,
Okay. I'll get back to it. Ask your question.
what's the logic behind increasing the setback for the 4-story versus 3-story versus 2-story?
It's human scale, so it's if you're 1-story and you have a 1-story building 10 feet away from you, but if you're on the sidewalk next to that development and the building is 4 feet tall, sorry.
It's very short.
To read if they can't even fit
So it's just creating that separation. As the building gets taller, you're pushing it away from you so you don't feel like a mouse.
Could we step back just for a second here? I mean, you mentioned that you did the study, that you saw other communities that had some ideas, and you're trying to make this code in a way that creates makes it more inviting for certain kinds of businesses to come in. Just curious, is this comparable to the areas, is the code set up in a way that's comparable to areas that are bringing in those kinds of businesses? You look at Lehigh or these other places, they're bringing in all these they're bringing in lots of buildings for office, etc. Is our code set up, have we compared the code to other cities that have actually brought in this kind of desired businesses?
Yes.
Or are we just making lots of little changes here and there? I just wanted to see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And Kara did a lot of research, and she and I discussed these items together, and we looked at combining mixed waterfront and mixed use, and they have different elements that weren't working when we combined them, so we kept them separate. However, we did research several different codes before coming up with some of these ideas. Some of the setbacks as the building gets taller, increasing the setback as the building gets taller, that is something you're seeing in other cities as well. And then also you're seeing a trend towards trying to have mixed use and mixed development in the cities in different locations.
So you do have a vision with all these proposed changes in here in the code.
We do. One of the biggest things is we had really big setbacks, and some of our commercial developers that came into the city, they commented on it. Now, they didn't push back. A couple of them pushed a little bit and asked for exceptions through the exception code. But that was one of the biggest things, was that we had really big setbacks. And after we looked at these other communities, they have much reduced setbacks, but make up for the tighter feel with some of these other factors, like stepping back or having a bigger setback in exchange for a taller building. And so it's very consistent with what we're seeing in other locations. It does allow for more flexibility with site design from a developer, because they have only a 10-foot setback versus a 20-foot, 30-foot setback as it was before. Now, in terms of bringing businesses in, right now we're working on it with our economic development director, with Owen. But when those big businesses like Adobe and Silicon Slopes type businesses, they want to be right on I-15. So we're waiting for that to become priced out, and then they'll start looking at us. So it's not just the design standards that will bring in businesses, but a little bit. They're working on, yeah, they have, oh, that, I don't know the details about that yet. Yeah, they're getting there.
Southeast?
Yeah. Oh, right.
They're,
A little slopey.
It's where they sell hay up there.
they do have residential and commercial on there,
Both.
we know that.
Okay, back to footprint development, allowing that in commercial development, residential above commercial, adding some standards such as minimum dwelling size and maximum density. The maximum residential density here in the RC is 14 units. That's what we're proposing. That's what it currently is in the mixed use zone, so we didn't feel that regional commercial should be less than that. Let's see, still also subject to the open space chapter. And there you go. Look at those specifics. Okay, mixed waterfront. Now, you've had a couple work sessions on this specifically, so do you have specific questions about it? Kara, will you summarize it just very briefly without going into too much detail?
Do you want me to talk about the table? Is that
Yes,
what's
and
new?
oh, the table, the one that hurt our brains. Yes.
Yes.
Let me see if we made this more user-friendly.
Okay, so we reworked the table. And so what it's doing, allowable density by project size and commercial percentage. That's what it's all based upon. So you have your development size, so if it's less than 10 acres, if it's 10 to 50 acres, or if it's development more than 50 acres. And then under each of those categories, there's a percentage of commercial that the project, would be proposing. And the percentage of commercial then determines your maximum density on residential areas. So for example, if you had a development less than 10 acres and you're providing 11 to 20% commercial area, your maximum would be 6 units per acre. Does that kind of make sense?
Does this make more sense than the last table?
So if I have a 10-acre lot, do I get my choice of each of those?
No, you're in the 10 to 50 because in order to qualify for the first one, you have to be less than 10.
Thank you. Good
Yes.
call.
Is there any reason why you didn't just have two, one less than 10 and one over 10?
Well, then the same argument goes for the 50. You need to put a less than in there. You got more than?
It's more than.
Okay, we're good.
We're good. So originally we had more, we had actually I think 4 or 5 categories. As you go up in size, the percentages really become, it becomes almost exponentially, it changes exponentially. If you have a 10-acre parcel, you really don't want to see more than 35% of it be commercial, because then you won't have enough residential to offset it and have it be a vibrant, livable community, right? Once you get up to a development of more than 50, you really want to try to you just really want to have the options. I'm trying to think of a good example. It's a good example. We looked at a couple things. The other thing, we don't have a lot of development over 50, a lot of opportunity more than 50 acres, but we have a couple, and we wanted to address them and give them an option. And let's see.
I mean, the only difference it makes is once you get over 20.
Yep, once you get over 20, you're right. We had a whole different breakdown here. We can go ahead and do it into. We looked at an example, and I'm trying to put my finger on what exactly it was. Why we had the 3. We brought it down from 5 to 3, and there really aren't a whole lot of changes here. We made a whole bunch of changes when we put it in this table, so it looks like we've lost most of the differences between the two. That's fine. You can go to 2. There you go. Makes it easier. Less brain damage.
Yeah,
we had more differences between the two in the first version, so good catch.
There's just not a lot of difference there, and I just thought.
There's not. Something else to point out. So, well, now these are two going to be connected, but between 16 to 25% and then 26 to 35%, you'll see the asterisks next to their overalls, their maximums. And then the asterisk refers to 30% of the residential development may have up to 14 units per acre. However, the overall average residential density shall not exceed the maximum. So that allows us to put higher densities along the waterfront areas, and then as it's transferring back into the rest of the city, we'll see like the lower ones, lower densities going back to that. And this is all similar to what you've seen before. There were no changes through here. Sensitive lands, it kind of depends on how 1904 goes, so what's approved there. This will change depending on how the discussion goes. So that's why it's highlighted. But other than that, there are no changes from what you've seen previously.
All right, so then we have the red, I got the keyboard now, so, okay. All right, moving on. Okay, then we have the buffer overlay. So these aren't exactly in the order of the presentation that I listed. So we come back to 1925 is currently the Lakeshore Trail section, and we're going to add the buffer overlay in that. And the buffer overlay it follows the entire length of the Jordan River and the lake shore, and it puts additional standards and spacing in place along those waterfronts. Kara has worked on this very hard, and do you want to summarize it? She has a great graphic in there that hopefully explains it really well.
So fun. Okay, so the main addition here is the graphic, as you can see. This one's mainly for Utah Lake Buffer, but the Jordan River stuff will still apply. It's just the graphic was specifically for the Utah Lake. So, for example, you'd have the lake here, your ordinary high water mark or your compromise line, and so here are the various setbacks. The riparian setback, this is the area where we don't really want things touched. That's our flex zone. Yeah, that's a don't do anything, leave it as it is. The whole purpose behind that is that that's kind of the flex zone. So if we have a major flood event, that's the area where it will flow. Then you have your trail corridor, and then from there you have your 15-foot area kind of acting as the buffer between the natural area and the development. That's kind of your easing into area. So the overall is 85 feet from where the ordinary high water mark compromise line is to the development. So you have here the riparian setback, you have, yes, and then your trail corridor, which is 20 feet with your trail in there, and then your lawn / patio area. You can kind of see a cute little example over there. So that's the main change that occurred. The other change.
So would the way this would work is that essentially the 85 feet is their setback from the high water mark. And then that then essentially says how far the trail and stuff like that then needs to be from the building, so it's pushing that down into the riparian setback. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes. The other item that was changed was our bank stabilization. We were kind of hoping to get a lot more help from this from various entities, but there's not a whole lot, unfortunately, out there. So what we have done is we are recommending that riprap, which is that rock kind of stabilizing that you see, we would recommend that that be prohibited. It has a lot of negative impacts. Makes the water flow faster, makes the water flow hotter. It actually has a pretty dangerous effect as it's going along. It'll bounce off the wall and it will shoot across, and then the water will bounce back and forth. So that's not a very good environment for any fish that are in there, or even just the bank stabilization itself. And other than that, this will be based on where the design standards go. That will have the section. But other than that, there were no changes from what you've previously seen.
All right, I know we've been excited for both of the mixed waterfront and the buffer. That was, we went on our field trip almost a year ago to visit all these other cities. As Kara mentioned, we've been trying to work with other entities like the Utah Lake Commission, the Jordan River Commission. We reached out to departments at the state. We reached out to universities. They're all quite busy, and we got some feedback, which is great, and others just kind of send us to their websites and resources. So we did the best we could based off of all of that. And we've sent copies of this to various state departments to make sure we're not stepping on any toes, and hopefully we'll have some additional feedback for you before our public hearing. Okay, open space. Really quick reminder, I'm not going to spend too much time in here. One thing I need to remember to do is update our new zone names, because this was written when we had our old ones. So we have a whole section of definitions in here for different types of amenities, different types of open space.
Can I go back to one of those?
Yes.
Or two of those?
Mm-hmm.
Number 4 on your definitions.
Okay.
Baseball diamond.
Yes.
I just question whether a baseball diamond is defined by how it's striped or what it's striped with. I would like you to just take out striped
with paint. Okay.
It needs to be striped, but
It could be chalk or something.
is-
Okay.
yeah, to me, that doesn't define whether it's a baseball diamond, what it's striped with, even though that's what they use nowadays more often than not, but,
Okay, good point. Yeah, we're just thinking with.
well, it should be striped so that you know it's
Yeah.
a baseball diamond. I don't have a problem with that,
Just
but
say,
it-
and striped to support the play of baseball.
right,
Okay.
yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I just don't necessarily think you have to use paint to do it. And then on, if I can find the other one, the definitions. Number 6. And this one, I don't know what, I mean, I realize we want something normal, but I just wondered about industrial cast iron, whether that was really what was necessary.
So this was a recommendation from Public Works for what they see that is sturdy enough to
Hold up for-
hold up. I can ask them if there are other materials that would work, but this was their recommendation just to make sure it's not either carried away or easily broken.
And I realize that, and that's why I didn't question the mounted on concrete. I'll go with that.
Okay.
Even though, that's not always done.
Okay, good point. I will ask that question. Okay.
Then on
25 is kind of the same.
Oh yeah, remove paint from 4 and 25. Good point.
Okay, thank you. I missed that one. I had a question on the trash can, which is 29.
Yep.
Okay, here it says it's supposed to be minimum capacity of 50 gallons.
Hmm.
Down below, when you go down to where they're
The
classified.
amenities, yep.
It says 35,
32.
or 32, yes.
Okay, I'll figure that out.
And I don't know what you want, but they shouldn't
Pick one,
differ.
yep. Okay. Got it.
I think that's, well, even on down farther if you, and I don't know how far you're going.
Oh, I'm going to go, I'm
I'll
still
let
up in
you-
the
I'll let you
definitions.
just keep going.
Okay. All right, so the approach is, as we've discussed, you have equivalent acres, because not all park space is created equal, in terms of its ability to provide benefit. So you have this multiplier here. If you provide an unimproved acre, that acre is worth 0.15 equivalent acres credit. Oh, same thing with open space with no access. Sensitive lands with limited access, so for example, a wetland that has a boardwalk, right? You get some credit for that, because even though it's sensitive, you're providing some access, or a slope that has a bike trail through it. So we have these different categories here. And then fully improved with full access, so that's what you picture as a nice green landscaped park full of amenities. That is worth 1 acre of that is worth 1 acre of credit. So so you have these examples here. If you have 10 acres of open space that consist of these different categories, they're providing 10 acres, but because of those multipliers, they're getting credit for 5.05 acres of park space, so equivalent acres. So that takes into account the different values of open space that they're providing. Minimum open space required, instead of a percentage, you see a new subdivision come in with 40 homes, we're not going to say, oh, their requirement is 15% open space or 20% open space. We're going to say they have 40 homes, they are required to provide 1 equivalent acre of park space. Now they can go back up to these different types here and provide a variety of acreage that might end up being more or less, but they are required for every 40 units in a development 1 equivalent acre. And so we have some examples here. There are exceptions where most of the lots are 1 acre in size, they're exempt, and then also in in the RR and the RA and the ag zones, they're not required. Now this is where I was talking earlier, where we have a floor as well, so that you don't end up with really crammed, a really super over-programmed park and really crammed together homes with no sense of open space. And so we have this floor here for single family, multifamily, mixed use and mixed waterfront, and then a combination if you have a multifamily and single family development. Now we did put some limitations in here as we were applying this to Mount Saratoga. We also applied it to Wildflower just as a test and several other communities in the city as tests. We didn't require them to comply, we just wanted to make sure it worked. And we added this limitation as well, that they can't have more than 50% of these items here, or of their open space, be provided with these items. So you don't want to have a development come in with absolutely no amenities and all sensitive lands or all unimproved property or all a detention basin. Oh, go back. That's a good point. It is worth 0. That was changed after this. Good point.
And I've got another question kind of about no, we'll talk about that in the next, later when we get to it. Never mind.
Okay. Okay. Down here? Oh. Oh, thanks. Extra only. Okay. All right. So this also answers the question. You've seen developments that don't want to provide any amenities. You're actually about to see another one that doesn't want to provide any amenities. So have fun with that. They don't like to listen to us. They'll listen to you more than us. So we're bringing them over. But this removes that argument. Oh, we don't need to provide amenities for our residents. We're good. We're just going to provide some nice views. We're solid. Don't worry about it. Or we're by the lake. We got the lake trail. That's all we need. This removes that. You have a minimum requirement for amenities. You have to provide amenities. Depending on how many equivalent acres you're required to provide, that determines how many points you're required to provide. We have a draft of how many points you should provide for a development, example math for it, and then we have a whole table full of amenities, and yes, we updated baseball fields. That was wrong, thank you. It was missing a 0 on the price, so that affected the points significantly. Some ice rinks, that would be great. Yeah, indoor ice rinks. You like hockey?
Little pocket ice rinks.
Sledding hill. We'll talk about Sledding Hill here in 1 second. Okay, so there are a few limitations though. You don't want to have, I know we all think developers won't do this, but you don't want someone to come in and say, I'm going to put 50 benches in and that's it, because that's the points. That's all I need, 50 benches. So limitation, no more than 25% of the points may be bent by one specific item type in any category. They have to provide different items from the lower end categories, C, D, and E, and then the bigger parks are required to also provide something from A and B. So there you go. And then also we have restrooms required, etc. The highlighted here is impact fee credits. We just need to verify that's possible. And
On the benches,
yes,
do we really need to require that they be cement?
that is also Public Works, based on their experience maintaining parks.
I mean, I've been to
Yeah.
a lot of parks where they're not, and they seem to hold up fairly well.
Yeah, we can.
Metal's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll loosen them up just a little bit. I'm fine with that. That makes sense.
I just, yeah.
And rubber.
All right. So at the Planning Commission's request, we did add some winter sports facilities. One thing, we actually went back and forth on the sledding hill option,
Liability.
and we pulled it off, exactly, liability issues. If a developer wants to do that and it's on an HOA park, it's not a city park, and they want to do that and they want to apply for it under this, well, and it's not just, hey, we have a natural slope, can we get credit for it? It's, we built a nice sledding hill that's safe and it's, you know, we put money into it. Then they can do this item here. When an amenity is proposed that is not listed, planning director shall compare the cost and capacity of the amenity with this table to determine a comparable points value.
So
You could let a luge or a skeleton,
Oh, sure.
I mean,
zip line.
right? Don't
Zip
you
line's
think
in
you'd
here.
want one of those?
Yeah, zip
Oh, that's
lines.
right. That's
You
right.
might want to add, it kind of falls under that last thing you just mentioned, like maybe skate park might be something we want to add as a,
We actually have,
Skate feet.
we have skate features like rock walls and kickers, and then we also have skate park, one pit in here.
So if
that. It
if
looks
they
specific
if they
one.
build a
Going down.
amphitheater
Huh?
and then people are using it as a sled hill in the winter, they don't have liability?
I'm sure they do. You don't want to make it tempting. So we had it in, we talked to our insurance company, we took it out. We have
Okay.
some options that we can do if it's a city park, but we just didn't want to kind of call attention to it
Okay.
for right now.
Not like putting up a sign, not a city sled area
Right, the thing is, if you.
at your
yeah.
own risk.
Then there's the signage problems.
Yeah, exactly. Then we have signage problems and enforcement problems, so.
As long as that's on a pole and not the two legs.
So we are working on a practical application spreadsheet. I'm learning how to make it locked, so we can give it to them and they can plug in how many acres and how many units, and all they can touch is, you know, that, and it says, okay, you have this many equivalent acres, here's how many points you need, and then there's the list of amenities, and they can kind of check the box. Trying to make it really user-friendly so that when we bring a project to the Planning Commission as well, you have a one-page sheet. This is how they're complying with the open space. And then payment in lieu is an option still, phasing, maintenance and city acceptance, making sure that it's required that everything's maintained nicely. Turf at a maximum height of 3 to 4 inches, that's for both fire and usability. Let's see. This is consistent with the city's maintenance program as well. City acceptance, this one is interesting. Right now, we have pretty much every application that comes in asking the city to take their open space. And there are not a lot of criteria in place for the city to accept that. Every time the city accepts an acre of open space, it ends up costing about $5,000 a year to maintain. And it's really hard to get and keep seasonal workers in the summer. So at the end of the summer, Parks Department had 2 seasonal employees maintaining all the parks in the city. So it becomes fairly difficult. To make sure that it is meaningful, the proposal is that it has to be a regional trail corridor identified on the Trails Master Plan, or a crucial connection between the corridor and then some standards. Be over 5 acres, equivalent acres, with a minimum average of 100 points per equivalent acre. So it's something that is offering a community benefit. It's well improved and people are going to use it. Or a smaller public park if it's offering a major public benefit like trailhead parking and has extra points. So trying to remove some of the ambiguity. The council's going to see this as well, so don't worry, they'll get to weigh in on it because it is their policy decision if they want to take open space. And so your feedback on this when you make your recommendation will be great, but they get to end up making the decision if this is good guidance or not. Okay. So you've seen that a few times. It appears to be working pretty well in terms of how it was working for Mount Saratoga. We've tried it on a few of our recent projects and it seems to be working well, so hopefully we can get this through as well. We've wanted to do this for about a year and a half, and we're pretty excited about it. Okay, site and architectural design standards. This one is still a little bit rough in terms of its organization, but this came together from so many different places. This came from all of the different design standards that were peppered throughout the zoning chapter, all of the different standards that were in the site plan chapter, in the subdivision chapter, as well as in the actual architectural design standards, which were how many pages? 25, 30? I lost track. So when we took out all the images and put all the text in here, this chapter was, I think, 20 some odd pages long, just text of design standards. And I was like, no. It was written like an architect. We're not architects. And so we tried to make this more planning commission and public and developer user friendly. So we cut this down to, I think, 4 or 5 pages. Not counting the mixed waterfront and mixed use. And we grouped it in terms of, we have a purpose and then applicability that it applies to pretty much everything. We have general site design standards that apply to non-residential as well as multifamily. So this does not apply to single family development, okay? And so we have pedestrian connectivity, parking areas, parking structure standards. We kept, these were, for the most part, all in the existing standards. So these are in the code today. And we just tried to streamline it and delete the ones that were a little over the top. Then we get to the commercial and institutional and office warehouse zones. So that's where you see things like shopping cart corrals, outdoor display areas, commercial lots looking for connectivity. Let's see. Then we get down to architecture. Now these apply to everything, whether it's residential or commercial. Long and monotonous walls. We're going to put an actual length in there. Building articulation so that they're shifting in some fashion so we don't end up with just plain squares. For the most part, these are also all in the existing architectural design standards. So this is what we're applying currently, only this is shortened and some of the other stuff has been deleted. Okay. I apologize I didn't highlight what was new and what was not new just because it was coming from so many different places. The only section that's really new, architectural design standards, residential. We have not had residential architecture. But we've always wanted it, and we're always giving feedback on architecture to developers, so we figured we should have some standards. This applies to multifamily, 2-family, and 3-family development, and then if there's a master plan, single-family development. So they're going to be putting design standards, their own design standards into their CC&Rs most likely. You know, Mount Saratoga, for example, they have their own architectural standards. Now they did they did something different, which is fine. They did the planned community zone, but if they were just doing a master plan development, they would still have these standards. And it's pretty simple. We have 2 sections here. One is architectural wrap. So that way, if you have a nice front of a building and it's on a corner lot, it has to continue along the street side so that you're having that good, good-looking architecture on all of the street facades. And then that they're wrapping it 2 feet back. And then requiring a minimum of 3 materials and 3 colors on the front and 2 on the others. And then no more than 75% of any building elevation shall consist of any 1 material or color. So not too over the top, but just a few guidelines that we can give to developers as they're coming in and have something in the code for.
So I did have a note on the highlighted one about the rear.
Oh yes, that was a question, a discussion point.
Yeah, so in the development that I live in, the first couple phases, a lot of the houses would have stucco on 3 sides, and then the rear they would put siding. So it would be weird if they had a wainscot rock along the front and sides, and then to put it, and then have it go all the way, and have it extend to the rear if there's siding in the rear.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I don't know if we continue to allow, I've never seen that anywhere in California where you have siding in the back. But I could understand that it saves money. But if that's the case, then to extend that to the rear would be really weird. So I'm not really sure what, if that's something we require to do.
Okay. Any other thoughts from the Planning Commission on?
So on the wrap, side. I know there's an example up where my sister and brother-in-law used to live, where this house had like a wainscot, but also like it was all brick in the front.
Yeah.
And like their HOA required them to wrap it, and so they had to wrap the whole house, and it looked really weird. Where it would have looked better just having maybe the wainscot go around without having to make it all brick. Do we have any like variance there? Like, is it like does the side of the house have to look exactly like the front, or?
No, what we were just saying is it's just the treatments, so we can reword that a little bit.
Would the windows have to have shutters then? Also, that would
If
be
they
a
had
treatment,
shutters
right?
on the front, yeah, they would.
And what do you mean by treatments?
Yeah, because that you really don't usually see is having side windows being shuttered.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I'll clarify that. Okay, perfect. All right, and then we have the non-residential architectural design standards. This is a much shortened version of what we have in the current architectural design standards. Removed most of the things that say should. There were a lot of shoulds in our architectural design standards, and things that are hard to measure, like should be appropriate, should be compatible. So pulled those. Tried to just keep the ones that are black and white. Four-sided architecture for what's visible. What are the exterior materials, limiting to number of colors, prohibiting brick veneer tile. It's just not very sturdy, and you end up seeing a lot of chipped buildings, but allowing normal veneer brick, which is still like a tile but thicker. Let's see. Then we have street orientation and metal buildings. That metal buildings are only permitted in the office, warehouse, and industrial zones, and that they are not to be the off-the-shelf metal buildings, and we can tighten that up if we need to. And then we have, so that in its entirety is the condensing of 19 or 20 pages of design standards from other places. That's after the pictures were removed. And so then we added a couple pages for the mixed use and mixed waterfront. You have seen this a couple of times. This is where we're talking about the mixture of residential and commercial office development, whether it's along the lake and or in a mixed use zone. This talks a lot about pedestrian focus, making sure that things are connected, that you don't have to drive between uses. Let's see, this talks a lot about having permeability between buildings and street level features and whatnot.
So could I ask about
Go ahead.
that? So where is the front of the building? Is it facing towards the street or towards the water? The front is, I guess, towards the street? Is that?
The main front is towards the street, but there is a secondary frontage towards the water, so that if you're on the trail or down by the water, it doesn't feel like the back of, like you're walled off from the development. It has permeability.
So then we would want
Like a patio dining, another entrance into the back of the
but
building.
then we would want four-sided architecture in that
Yes.
case, right? Right? Okay.
Mhm. You have anything you want to point out specifically in here?
I had a question on the operational standards, number 10.
Yep.
I just wondered why they can't operate between 10 p.m. 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., but they can't have deliveries before 7. Why is that 7 instead of 6?
This came from another code that we looked at. I don't recall the actual reason for it.
I would
Outdoor, because it includes residential uses, because you don't want to have deliveries. Normally you get commercial deliveries in the middle of the night or 3 in the morning, but if you have a mixed use development that includes residences, you don't want to be having that occur in the middle of the night. So 10 p.m. to 7 a.m.
It's still 6. I wouldn't think.
Oh,
that-
you're saying why is one
why
6
is
and
it
one 7?
Why shouldn't it be 6 instead of?
Oh yeah, let's just make those the same. You got that clear? Okay. I thought you were asking why they weren't doing it at night. At
No,
night.
that's okay. I
Okay.
mean,
Yeah.
I just thought rather than 7, why not make it 6? If
Yeah.
if the other one's 10 to 6, why
That
not
works.
make it?
Oh,
I mean, I realize that residential's, but if they've got kids, they're gonna be up and getting ready to go to school by 6, so.
on that same page,
You hope, or they're rushing them out, they get up at 6:20 and they're rushing them out the door at 6:30.
so Commissioner Frank, if you have another one, before you move on, I just have something on the same page. On 1A little 3.
Building standards?
Yeah, so you got 1A little 3.
Tower?
Yeah, see that last number, you have 100 written and then 45 numbers. I think you meant 145 feet.
Just do 145.
Yeah.
That's a weird one. Thank you.
And then also another
So glad you.
following points should be so 1B 2.
Prohibited building material.
Yeah,
B2?
B.
Oh, B2, sorry.
Following point, I wrote following points should be sub B2.
Oh, yes. Prohibited building materials, indent. Got that, Kara?
That makes sense.
Yes.
Remember what I wrote?
Thank you.
Okay,
Formatting.
that's it for me. Sorry,
We actually
Commissioner
have
Funk.
to, in some of these cases, we frequently have to select it, clear formatting, and start from scratch because Word gets all wonky. So we miss some of these. We've kind of gone cross-eyed on this as well. This is a lot of code, and we've been working on it for a long time. So thanks for actually reading it and picking up on things. All right, so as we talked about before, also in the buffer overlay, Kara went through where the buffer overlay applies. That's that 85-foot setback from the waterfront. Now, the buffer overlay actually extends 150 feet or 200 feet, depending on where we are, back from the water. Now, it doesn't mean you can't build in that area. It just means you're subject to these overlay standards. So this is where it talks about some of the stepping back of height, talks about ground floor transparency, having the entrance on both sides so that you're not walling off the water. So just some of those design standards here. Okay. Moving on. So this one is just, this is what you're used to seeing, which is our normal packet of things that have come up as we're as we're working on development. So you'll recall, some of you were here a couple years ago when we went through the code and tried to remove all the exceptions that were arbitrary, that didn't have any criteria, that said, oh, the standard is this, unless the city council wants to give an exception, and there were no criteria. We removed all of them, we thought. Until we had a recent applicant come in and ask for an exception from the landscaping requirements for a city pump station. And we went, what exception? And looked at the code, and sure enough, in 1906, it said, the planting standards shall apply unless the city council determines otherwise. So we're removing that so that the code applies. And the other we're proposing, we're not sure, we would like your input on this, but we're running into some issues with turf requirements. And with all of the water issues we had this year, we wanted to discuss whether or not we still need to have minimum turf requirements. The issue we're coming across is that this doesn't just apply to commercial development, it applies to like HOA open space. And do we really want to have turf requirements in those? So we're proposing to remove the minimum turf requirement, but we can chat about that. It's a big conversation. We can continue. We can postpone that if we need
With Commissioner
to.
Steele.
We'll chat. She'll have input on that. I just want to bring it to your attention so you can think about it and read it.
That's a big discussion.
Continue that. Parking in the draft. So we have this requirement for parking lot islands, and what we're proposing is that if a row of parking abuts a park or a commercial area that is landscaped, or some sort of open space with landscaping, and it has the same number of trees that they would have in the islands, it's offering shade, it's still resulting in the same result, not requiring parking lot islands along that single row of parking with those parameters. Most likely you'll see that in parks, but occasionally you might see it where there's a tree-lined landscaped area on a commercial development, but for the most part you'll probably see that in parking lots in parks. More clearly requiring connectivity between parking lots. And we had this weird access requirement where a certain number of stalls you had a through connection required. but it doesn't really work for vehicle flow, and it's actually fairly unsafe, so we're recommending to remove that requirement. And then just a clarification of who the land use authority is for, it said that the Planning Commission would make certain interpretations, but it can be different depending on whether it's a council approval, a Planning Commission approval, or a Planning Director approval. If it's a, a minor site plan amendment, we don't want to have to bring the parking interpretation to the Planning Commission if it's a staff approval, so.
How would that affect
Just calling-
something like Walmart, where it's really hard to get out of there? You have to either go over by one of the restaurants, or you have to go over to this area and do a U-turn. I mean,
Yeah.
are you going to have more, with the changes that you're proposing, allow more access to SR 73, for example? So you have
No.
egress, or what?
This is just the design inside the parking lot, not out onto the roads. So just the layout of where the stalls are going and where the accesses between the rows of parking are, and so it doesn't affect where the parking lot is accessing a road.
Okay, so for example, down here south of Redwood Road, the proposals by the new Safeway have more entrances and exits to main thoroughfare. You're not going to address any other code that talks that, okay?
No, that is also, that's a spacing and flow issue as opposed to a parking lot layout.
Okay.
Yep, but yeah, we can talk about that on another topic. So also in subdivisions, requiring our data table where it says how many lots and open space and all of that, we want that to be recorded on the plat as opposed to just an accompanying document. So just modifying that. I've actually been requiring it and just found out recently it wasn't on the list, so it was on the list, but it wasn't on the plat, it was just in the submittal, so we're putting it on the plat. Okay. And then signs, this is one of those where we had that long discussion about how do we allow, if we're not defining things by content, if we're not saying for sale signs are allowed, if we're not saying political signs are allowed, how do we address those without calling them something that's content based? And we had that huge discussion about someone needs to sell their house, how do they do that? And we wrote some language for temporary signs for homes that are currently for sale or lease. Well, we just had a commercial property go for sale or lease, and we hadn't had that same language in those zones. So that's what this is, to propose that they can have additional temporary signage if they're currently for sale or lease. Now, we're not saying that it has to be a for sale sign, but it allows them to have a for sale or lease sign. Okay, I think that is it, actually.
I have a question on that chart right there.
Yes.
The minimum evergreen trees is out of 3 by it should be.
Oh, yep, we modified these, correct.
There's no 3.
There's no 3 anymore. We got rid of it.
And I want to go back to one way back. On the multiple use. And this is just kind of a question that I have. You had a little footnote there that said if they put a patio out front that they could shorten it 5 feet in the front.
Where was that?
Multiple use way back.
Oh, yes, yes. Okay.
Um,
We did that in multiple zones.
And I don't have a problem with that, but if you're going to allow it in the back, in the front, why don't you allow it in the back? Because to me, the front's more important than the back. I mean, I don't really care too much what they do in the back.
Actually, if a porch is under a certain height off the ground and it's an at-grade patio, then it doesn't have to meet the setbacks. So that's kind of already addressed. In the front, the porches are usually a little higher, and so they would need to have an exception for that. But the back, for the most part, is taken care of. If you want a higher porch, then right now it's not in there, but at-grade is already covered. So, but we can write that. Unenclosed porches may include the rear.
I mean, if you allow it in the front, to me, the back's less important than the front. If you're going to allow it in the front, I'd allow it in the back too.
Yeah, what's the reasoning behind that grade versus not? I'm thinking makes waterfront or whatnot, or maybe you've got a little bit of a slope, and so they've got to kind of do a raised deck back there. Well, now all of a sudden they couldn't really encroach.
Right.
Because they're not at grade. So is there a specific reason why You don't want a raised porch versus a grade porch to encroach upon the.
I do have an example. So, and this could open a discussion, I'm not sure, but I was visiting a friend and their neighbor had a back deck that was 5 feet from the fence, and their yards were only about 15 feet deep. So that person's deck, so we're sitting in the backyard and that person's deck is like, you know, the activity center above the yard, and sound carries a lot more at that higher level for some reason. So it's all kind of perspective and privacy and proximity and things like that. So if we do allow, you know, a deck 10 feet up in the air, it raises a question of what's the appropriate proximity to the neighboring yard.
What is the current setback?
Right now, if you have a deck above, is it 2 feet or 3? 2 feet, you have to meet your setback. So if your rear setback is 25 feet, your deck has to meet that setback as well if it's higher than 2 feet from the ground.
And is that grade, when we say 2 feet above grade, is that grade to the land, or is that based on the house?
The land underneath it.
So if you did have a situation where the land dropped off.
Yeah.
Then you'd have that problem, even though it might be right at grade with the house.
Right.
So we maybe get to handle it that way.
Well, that still ends up with the same situation though, because if it drops off a lot, then you're still going to end up with something that could be right over someone's door. So, I mean, we can certainly change it.
And
That was just the reasoning
And
for
this,
it.
the back is 20 feet for the mixed use, and so you're only taking 5 of the 20.
It's true, if we're only taking 5 feet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna give it to them in the front, give it to them in the back. I don't.
Do we want that to apply to decks and porches?
And that might be something where in residential, but in like all the commercial, which I think is from what you're talking, what I've heard.
Well, this is mixed use, so this.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It would probably make more sense, or less sense in a mixed use environment.
Okay. You have any other comments?
No.
Thank you, everyone. I know that was burly, but we appreciate it.
Moving on. Item number 8. Has everybody seen the minutes from 22nd of September? I'll entertain a motion.
Can't make a motion because I was not here, so for once, y'all are gonna have to step up.
I'd like to see that more often. You know, other people doing the motion.
And I was so busy looking at everything else, I didn't look at the minutes that close. So I really would rather not.
Still entertaining a motion. I mean, do you want me to coach you through it? You just say, I move to approve the minutes from September 22nd Planning Commission.
Then I move to approve the minutes from the September 22nd, 2016 Planning Commission meeting.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Is there a question on the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Item number 9, reports of action. No reports of action. Commission comments. Item number 10. Okay, director's report. Item 11. I think you had that last page of the packet. All right. Without objection, we adjourn.
So there's no meeting on the 23rd of December? Or December? Okay.
What are the last 2 dates?
So we have November 10th and December 8th. And then in 2 weeks, the 27th.